these modalities force us to take the mask off and let ourselves be seen fully. And I think that's ultimately what intimacy is all about, right? You could be married to someone for 50 years and not ever actually know who they truly are deep down in the most vulnerable, purest, untainted expression of their being, because there's just so much in the way. So for us, I think that's been the real gift is being able to see each other in that way and choose each other again and again and again from that pure place.
Welcome to the Multiverse, where we believe that mushrooms can actually save the world. Each week, we'll be meeting with thought leaders and experts to extract the best insights and stories across everything from functional fungi, psychedelic medicine, and so much more. Thanks for listening. Step into the multiverse with us.
All right. Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Into the Multiverse. My name is Alli Shaper, and today is a very exciting day because I have two of my dear friends and two incredibly inspirational people, Ben and Azrya Bequer, on the podcast. And they are doing some really, really exciting stuff in the world. But as a high-level title introduction, they are both the co-founders and co-stewards and co-authors of BEQOMING, which we're going to learn a lot about. So what I'd love to do is just like a brief context for everyone listening that doesn't know about you guys is you wrote a book called BEQOMING that I recently read, and it's a masterpiece. It really is. I was explaining a little bit about this to you guys before we started recording, but I think what the book did for me specifically is put language and words to feelings that I didn't really know how to form constructs around. So the perspective shift from being able to like put words to concepts is so impactful. And these are like big life concepts that are, the questions that drive all of us. So I'm really excited to dive into the book. I think inspired by the format of how you guys wrote the book, I'd love you guys to introduce each other. So maybe we'll do like a 2-minute, there's obviously a whole book of introductions that you could make about each other, but 2 minutes, introduce each other. And I think we'll start with maybe B. You want to introduce Az first?
Sure. Azrya grew up bouncing between Germany and New York and came to LA to pursue a career in acting, and really found that to be unfulfilling as happens in Hollywood, right? And sat in an ayahuasca ceremony, which was really special in that she saw her whole life flash before her eyes. So she saw like a highlight reel of the rest of her life in her first ceremony. And it completely changed her. And in that ceremony, she saw that she would be coaching the most influential CEOs in the world, celebrities, and at the time didn't even know a celebrity, and had never coached anybody in her life. And so she was shown this, and it just felt true. And she and then she got back to her reality and was like, oh shit, like I have to close this big gap, like between like what I saw I was supposed to do and what my dharma is in this world. And and then really started, and then took some really huge trust leaps, like rebuilt her whole life, shaped her head, faced off with zero in the bank account over and over and over again, but just trusted. And I've never met anyone that is stronger at coaching people one-on-one. It's remarkable. And then we met and really just saw how our skills were so vastly different and so complementary. And within 2 weeks of meeting each other, we were planning our entire lives together. And I won't go into that piece, but that's a quick backstory.
Yeah, so Benjamin has evolved from when he was a kid, he was Benji. Then he became Ben, which is also his father's name. And then just in the last couple of years, due to some very profound transformation, he's chosen to let go of Ben, and it's either Bee, like honeybee, or Benjamin. And so, this theme of death rebirth is very consistent in the work that we do, and everything that we believe in ultimately is just letting the identities kind of continually unravel. So Benjamin's first identity really was coming out of school. He had really struggled with severe learning disabilities, which had created a deep wound of lack of self-worth. which he kind of turned into fuel to make a lot of money and have a lot of success. Him and his dad built a business to 1,800 employees. They were making over $200 million in annual revenue. And he really built that business from scratch with real zero expertise. And then sold that business in 2010 and then lost his father 6 years later. And that was a kind of, an opportunity to step into being, honoring the preciousness and the fleeting nature of life, right? But also really stepping more into his purpose, his soul purpose, which he really didn't know what it was supposed to be. And at that time, he was telling everyone he wanted to live with more purpose, but he wasn't actually doing it. His actions weren't aligned with what he was saying. So the universe, as it often does, punched him in the face, forced him to kind of face a pretty significant rock bottom moment. It was a really nasty lawsuit he got involved in, and everything he had built was kind of like on the line. And yeah, it was this beautiful spiritual awakening moment where he realized that he needed to completely shift his operating system. So he built what was then called a personal strategic plan, having been part of many CEO organizations like YPO and not Gen X anymore, Alder, Tiger 21, and just, surrounded by people who were constantly spending a tremendous amount of time and energy building business plans. He noticed that successful people were not spending time thinking about their emotional, spiritual, mental well-being. And so he started building this system that could help people who had already achieved a lot of success in the external world start to do that deeper work. And that's right when we met, when he had already built it, and it was already kind of calling him to share it with people, but he really didn't know in what capacity. It was still very murky. And it was this beautiful complementary puzzle piece to what I had been creating on my side, which was really this very, a lot of emotional intelligence work, a lot of deep psycho-spiritual work, working with the plants, shamanic realms, very much kind of more of the feminine side of things. And then he brought that very grounded, structured, linear masculine energy. And when we met, it was like, oh, we were perfectly designed to click together and then make something that we couldn't have made without each other, which is Becoming.
Beautiful. So you wrote this book, Becoming. And I would say it's more of a, ecosystem is an overused word, but it's an ecosystem of a lot of different things. And you have a beautiful definition of becoming at the beginning of the book. When I read it, it's a whole thing as a soundbite, or like the entire thing. You could have 400 quotes that you want to live on coffee mugs. So it was very difficult to do this. But what I thought would be really helpful for people that are maybe interested in the work that you guys are doing is I picked out 4 or 5 pieces from the book that I think are like good little snippets of like what kind of flavor, like a good tease of the essence of the book. And I wanted to read them. So one is right at the beginning, we vow to be anything but appropriate, for that is not where your truest truth resides. 2 is, I think this is from Az, is you are a molecular masterpiece that can shape and mold reality with the power of your thoughts and feelings. You did not traverse the narrow passage of your mother's womb and gasp for air covered in blood and goo to be pretty good. You came to live fiercely and love unapologetically, to jump, fall, soar, and fall again, to milk every last drop of potential from this extraordinary thing called your life, and to leave a legacy that your great-grandchildren will speak of with awe and wonder when they profoundly share about their lineage, feeling the warm echoes of your vibrant soul still surrounding them long after you're gone. I love that. So beautiful. The next 3 are a little bit shorter. The point isn't to graduate. The point is to learn to love the dance. And what's required is the willingness to face the fear that is keeping you the same. Welcome to your chosen destiny. The last one, this is kind of like towards the end of the book, is think of it as taking the red pill, where you can wake up out of a dream and begin assimilating an entirely new version of reality. Not all encompassing, but those are some of my favorite pieces. With that, can you guys explain the 3 phases of becoming
Mm.
that you've broken down in the book. Super, super high level, obviously, that's the entire 330 pages that we won't get to.
333.
333.
Yes,
I can't
very
forget those
important.
last three. Can't forget those last three.
333 is like my number. And so when the book ended up being
Was that
333
intentional?
pages,
I was like annoyed. I was like, no, it's not going to be. There'll be
I was like,
changes.
it's going to be 333 pages.
Yeah.
Watch. And sure enough.
That's amazing because you're also, releasing the book on 2/22.
Yeah.
22. Damn.
I know.
Wow. Okay.
That wasn't an accident, though.
At 11:11.
No, at 2:22.
At 2:22 p.m. Oh, okay.
I don't know.
You should
Someone
do that,
suggested
though.
we should do some kind of like launch moment at 2:22 p.m.
Absolutely, you should. Or at least have all your people send good energy at 2:22.
Yeah.
Like send some sort of.
Yeah.
I'll start a WhatsApp for that.
Thank you
You're welcome.
for supporting our portal number experience.
Of course.
I'll take that one.
Yeah, please.
We define the 3 stages of becoming. The first stage is really where most of, I would say, our society and where I spent most of my life living, which is one where you're guided by your personal preference. There's a kind of a selfish nature to it. And you see that collectively in kind of the world we live in is driven by greed. And some of us evolve and you move beyond that stage and you move into a mutual preference. And so if we were, as an example, if we were in a relationship, I would care about your preference and you would care about my preference, but we would also very much still care about our own preference. And then the magic really happens in the third stage of becoming, where you transcend preference and you move beyond preference and you make decisions not based on your preference or my preference, but from a place of what would love choose. And so we use that all the time and like, okay, like I don't know if I want to go left or right. Beyond my preference and beyond your preference, what would love choose? What's in the greatest good, right? What serves the most? And so that's a quick way of describing the 3 stages of becoming.
And also love, like capital L love, and love is a complex word because so many people have different interpretations of what it means. We're really referring to like the larger force field of energy that you can tap into, certainly through psychedelic experiences. That's one of the gifts that it gives us, is it allows us to feel the interconnection, the oneness of all of reality, because it dissolves those veils of separation. And it can often, not always, right, but can often give us access to this profound sense of a universal cosmic love that is actually really intelligent and very much kind of this benevolent force guiding things behind the scenes, and has a much more zoomed out and much more kind of accurate perspective than our human identities and egos do, right? We think we know what we want. We think we know who we are. But then a lot of times, specifically through those types of experiences that psychedelics can facilitate, we start to catch a glimpse of something that is much bigger than that. And I think the real magic happens when you realize that you are also not separate from that, right? So if I ask myself the question, what would love choose? It's like, what would love choose through me as the vessel?
That's beautiful. And I think that we talk about this concept in your book about fate versus free
will. Yeah.
And that's something I think about a lot. I think a lot of people do. It's like, are we going to end up in the same place no matter what? Or is
Mhm.
there some autonomy in how we land there? And have you guys seen the movie Benjamin Button
Mhm.
with Brad Pitt? You know the scene where they backpedal from like a moment in time and then they detail around all of the specific timing and serendipities and synchronicities, all that had to line up exactly at the right time to lead to that one moment.
Mm.
And I love that scene because it's like the butterfly effect, right? It's like someone you said to someone at a coffee shop 7 years ago could end up being like the thread that weaves into like why you've landed here. And your relationship, which the whole book, by the way, just, I think I meant to say this at the beginning when I read it. It's like 50 Shades of Grey. I said this to you guys, 50 Shades of Grey, The Untethered Soul, The Four Agreements. There was another one in there. The Notebook. I had to throw that one in there because it's like this epic love story. But it's like if all those had a baby, this is, that's what the book felt like.
Mm.
But there's so many complexities to what landed you guys here. Like for you guys to be sitting here on my couch in front of my moss wall filled with mushrooms, like so much of those little synchronicities and timing had to line up. How much of it do you think is, fate versus free? And like, what's the likelihood that you guys were here? Were you always destined to be here no matter what?
Such a good question.
That's a huge question. And I would answer that a bunch of different ways, but I guess I would say it's a paradox, right?
Yeah.
It's both, right? It was all predetermined, and we had to choose every step of the way. And so we like to say that the universe gives you curriculum, and as you evolve beyond that curriculum, right, you pass the test. Wayne Dyer used to have a quote: "Life gives you the same exam over and over again until you pass it." And so, as life gives you curriculum, you evolve to the universe is benevolent. So it wants you to step into your highest expression of yourself. And so what it does is when you pass that curriculum, it gives you more curriculum, and it's relentlessly serving you. Right. And so as you make decisions and move through life, the universe just continues to kind of give you those. And you have to choose at every moment to pass. And then I'd also say, it happened exactly as it was supposed to, because as our friend Peter Crone would say, like, it happened.
Right. How do you know that it was perfect? Because it's what is, right?
Yeah.
It's what actually occurred. I think the way I've sat a lot with this question, and I think in the book we talk about there's this sweet spot where like fate and free will actually kind of coexist and intersect, because they sound like they're incompatible, right? It's either free will and I'm running the show and I'm making autonomous decisions, or there's a bigger picture and I have zero control and I'm just along for the ride, right? And they feel very contradictory. And that's why it's a paradox, because there is a place where they do actually coexist. And it's like this, it's really hard to put into words. It's kind of like a feeling, but I think the way I sort of imagine it is like our souls are on a journey of maturation through time and a spectrum of time that I feel is much larger than just one lifetime. And so, yeah, just like signing up for, school, where you have a specific curriculum that is over the course of however much time you're enrolled in that program is designed to get you from one place to the next. You have the opportunity. Like, how are you going to show up? When those exams come, are you going to be prepared? Are you going to lean into them? Are you going to give it everything? Or are you going to play hooky and, be distracted and ultimately flunk out? Life is kind of the same thing, and I think that's why a lot of times you see patterns showing up in people's lives. By the time someone comes to us and is like, hey, I feel like I could use some support in my mental, spiritual, emotional health, they're probably experiencing kind of a like being trapped in a bit of a loop of some kind.
Groundhog
right?
Day.
Exactly. Where it's like, why does this keep showing up in all these different iterations? It's like, well, it's because you haven't actually fully unpacked the gift contained in this lesson yet. And so if the lesson's painful, of course, our knee-jerk reaction is to avoid it and resist it. But this is why I love the plant medicine so much, because they essentially force us to go into those uncomfortable places, and they take away kind of the ability even to resist in a lot of ways, right? I mean, if you fight the psychedelic journey, you're really, you're in for a bad experience. But if you can learn to let go into it, even if it's deeply uncomfortable, you will end up somewhere else, most likely in a more beautiful place. And so to me, it's that's my experience of life. And what I've found is the more I say yes to those exams, if you will, and the more I kind of almost, like study ahead, where I'm like, okay, I want to grow and I want to find that next edge. I want to be on that leading edge of my own consciousness. How can I kind of say to the universe, bring it on? Like, I'm going to choose to participate in my evolution instead of waiting for life to happen to me.
The gift wrapped in thorns.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. And it's interesting because someone asked me what becoming was about. And their first question after I kind of explained it, they're like, oh, so it's not, something you get to and then it's done. It's not like you become and then you're like tapped out, right? You like have done it. And the definition actually, is it okay if I read the definition? Which is right at the beginning of the book. devotion to the process of becoming who you are designed to be by radically embracing your greatest challenges as curriculum and savoring the full spectrum of life. Um, you
We've
know,
actually added the full spectrum of life and death.
and death. Oh, I like yeah. Is that not in my version yet?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, life and death. So, um, you know, does the process of becoming ever end?
I mean, I guess the really honest answer is I don't know. I would say safely not in this lifetime. I mean, who knows what the larger trajectory is of consciousness experiencing itself through us in these human forms. But I think in this lifetime, like the whole point is to be in the dance, right? And that's why it says like the point isn't to graduate. The point is to dance the dance of light, of shadow, of life, of death, of pain, of bliss, of the full spectrum. That is the gift. That is the gift of being, you know, in a physical form in the first place and having a sensory experience.
Azrya has a quote that I love. There's further to go and nowhere to get. And
Mm.
and so I would say like life is one big practice.
Mhm.
And so when you start looking at it, like it's kind of a paradox. It's all a fucking paradox, right? But like
Yeah.
there's further to go, right? So there's my becoming is and I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Mhm.
And so it's this big paradox of like there's this journey of continuously becoming, growing, and and I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I'm already perfect.
Mm. Yeah, I'm already whole. Like we like to think of we've spent a lot of time thinking about like this industry of self-improvement, and even that language, it's innately woven into that language is the implication that like there's something wrong with us or that something's missing and that we need to like improve upon ourselves.
Mhm.
But our perspective is that you can't improve upon perfection. Like you're actually already perfect. The real you is actually already perfect, but there is this potentially this sort of illusory you, right? Which Ram Dass talks a lot about, right? His whole thing is becoming nobody. It's like let go of the identity that you took on, that you think is you, this separate sense of self, this person with a name and a job and XYZ, right? But the realist you is actually this emanation of capital L love. It's like this infinite energy source that we're all intrinsically part of. And our identities are again like the part of the fun, but the trick is not to be so attached to them that they're like running the whole show, you know? And I think that's why this transition from being an actress to going really deeply into personal transformation was so seamless for me because as an actress, what are you doing? You're taking identities and you're inhabiting them for a moment in time,
Mm.
right? And you're becoming one with them and then you kind of take them off and you realize like I'm not just one thing. I can be so many different archetypes. So I think and that's why I love the name of your company, Multiverse, because it really is that. Like it's a multiverse inside of each of us that we get to unpack and discover on our journey of becoming.
I love that. Something you said that um, I actually spent a lot of time thinking about this, the idea of feeling like you're exactly where you're supposed to be,
Mhm.
which a lot of times when people they're like, "Ooh, something's not right." Like it's a feeling of like when you walk into a party or you're in a conversation with someone or you're like you're anywhere where you're not like, in your guys' language, like a full fuck yes to this moment in time. Like right now, I'm like, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be in this couch, drinking this tea, talking to you guys, like doing this. Um, but there's no worse feeling than feeling like you're not where you're supposed to be. And
Mhm.
a friend who I want you guys to meet, brilliant guy, gave me this example, and he doesn't even remember saying it, which is I think is just the proof of like the universe going, speaking wisdom through him because it was
Mhm.
like a really impactful thing for me. But talking about this idea of like a soul contract. So when you're born, your soul is looking for a body to inhabit, and when you choose, or when the soul chooses the body, you make a contract, and this contract is like you're gonna fulfill this as your kind of like duty in life. And so anytime you're not feeling like you're where you're supposed to be, it's because you're not aligned with your soul contract. And you guys went through both of you in totally separate ways, such different transformations, like from your, past seasons of your life to get to this point. And I'd love to just hear about, you know, that feeling and like that pull, because most people don't follow the pull, right? They're like, okay, it's a work to get to Friday mentality, but very unconventional life to say the least that you guys have built for yourselves. And I want to talk a lot about kind of the resistance to that as well. But just can you just speak a little bit to that pull?
Sure. Well, so originally Becoming was called The Full Fuck Yes, because it was the whole spark, I guess, of what's being created now. It originated with that, what you're describing, this feeling of like, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I'm like in alignment with who I was designed to be, you know, my purpose, my dharma, like what I came here to do and give in this life. I'm fully expressing that. And I'm saying yes to opportunities that are in alignment with that. And I'm saying no to all the things that are not, which of course there are many, right? So it's this almost like a little bit of a scavenger hunt that you're on, I would say, where, you know, initially you don't know really, like who the fuck am I really? What am I designed to do? Why am I here? You know, that in of itself is a whole chapter of the journey. So yeah, I would say it's ultimately it's a sensation or a feeling that you can learn to build trust with, that feeling of the full fuck yes. And then it can start to be this compass that guides you through life. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I could talk about this question probably for the whole podcast. You know, but for me, like I how do I answer this? But it's short. So I feel like there was this, because of my learning disabilities as a child, there was this, always this insecurity. And so I fed that by external validation, right? And so when I became an entrepreneur, I was really good at it. And so it fed that lacking in me. And then also with women, there was this insatiable appetite for the conquest of women, really in a lustful way that was not healthy. And but as time went on, I just kind of, there was this feeling that I couldn't get around, this hole in me that I wasn't living with purpose. And I went through a whole, you know, kind of spiritual awakening around a business deal gone bad, that kind of forced me to look at my life and where I was out of integrity with myself and where I was out of integrity with the person I wanted to be. And so I just couldn't, it got to the point where the pain, the internal pain was so significant that I couldn't avoid it anymore. And so the last, you know, 3 years of my life, I did, you know, 40 ayahuasca ceremonies, like filled a lot of purge buckets, just like, you know, going deep and facing my shadow in a real big way. But the interesting thing, we call it the choiceless choice. It really never felt like a choice. Like, so when you say, what was that pull? It was like, it was almost like a push.
Like you were kicked off the cliff. You didn't
Yeah, it
jump.
was like, yeah. And so it's never felt like I had a choice. It was like it was almost just like, this is what has to be done.
Mm.
Yeah, that's my, I guess, expression of it.
I want to ask you guys about the resistance, specifically with relationships that were a part of your previous seasons of life. Because anyone that's changing rapidly, I think, goes through this. And the most typical example, I was speaking about this the other night with some friends. The easiest example is like people that decide to get healthier and stop drinking alcohol, the resistance that they face from relationships that are close in their life that knew them in this version, that aren't making those choices, even though it's a choice to, you know, arguably be healthier and more fulfilled. Like it feels like a positive choice, but to step out of the conformity of the collective, if you will, is faced with a lot of resistance. And a lot of people don't know how to have those conversations with people. And it's something you said in the book too, of like, not everyone is meant to walk us all the way home. Something along those lines. Like that hit me like really, really strongly. How do you make sense of that? And like, how would you advise people that are going through massive transitions to have the conversations with people in their life that are resistant to their change?
I think that's a good question for you.
Yeah.
He really dealt with that at a pretty extreme level.
Yeah, I would say, the first thing I would say is resistance is by definition causes suffering, right? And so if you're in resistance to how somebody else is um, engaging with you, then you are creating suffering, right? And so the first thing I would say is acceptance of like, this is where they stand and this is where I stand, and not being in resistance to that. And that was very difficult for me.
Not being in resistance to their resistance.
Yeah. And so that, just being in acceptance of what is, and accepting not making them wrong for their opinion, right? And so again, I could talk for the whole podcast about this subject, but I went through and really in some ways still kind of am on the tail end of it, but like encountered some real significant resistance from my family and some close friends over this transition that I went through. I mean, like I said, I sat in 40 ayahuasca ceremonies in a couple years, and it was really intense. And people were viewing me as a drug addict, and people who don't have context didn't realize that this wasn't fun and games. Like I was doing heavy, difficult work. But they had a perception, and it was a lot because I cared about them, right? And even within my own family, my mother and I had went through a difficult time as well, and we beautifully navigated that and are on the other side of it. But there was real concern, and it was really good curriculum for me to learn to not make them wrong for their perspective, and also not. I was always a really passionate person that would try and convince people and force people, or if I just have one more conversation, they're going to understand it my way. But really just taking space to give them the privilege, as our friend Brianna says, the privilege of their process, give myself the privilege of my process that I'm in, not make them wrong for their perspective. And then also just let go of the attachment to anyone going on this journey. And I think also, when you're in alignment with your true purpose, when you're in alignment with yourself, when you're in integrity with yourself, it gets really easy to stand in that. Even though there's grief of what the relationship used to be, there's a grieving process, but it gets really easy. Where it's more difficult, I think, is when you're not sure if you're in integrity with yourself. But it's been really difficult for me, and I feel like I'm on the other side of all that, and I'm having some healing and healthy conversations with some of the people that were in resistance. But it's also the other piece that's really powerful is when you're doing the kind of the work that we've done, that I've done the last couple of years, and questioning yourself at the highest levels, and really starting to walk in integrity and doing that work. Anyone who's not doing it, you become a very difficult reflection for them. And so they also, if they condone your behavior, if they condone what you're doing, if they really like support it, it's difficult for them to do that, because they have to look at where they're potentially out of integrity with themselves, or where they're not doing the work. And so the easiest way to avoid that internally is to
Reject
be a naysayer to what I'm doing, right? And because I've become a reflection. And so when I'm in a place in my life where I won't make a financial decision, I won't make a business decision, I won't do any of those that are not purposeful. And so when you're walking in that level of integrity, which is the first time in my life I can truly say that, it becomes difficult for some people to do it, because they don't want to look in themselves in the same way. And so when you understand that, then you just have compassion for their perspective and where they're at, and just kind of like, love them, for where they're at, and don't need them to be anywhere other than where they're at.
And like you guys said, not everyone is supposed to walk you the whole way home. But that's difficult, right? To let go of relationships that we're only supposed to be with you for a season. Like the seasonality of relationship, like that word has been a huge teacher for me, because I think everyone's attached to this idea of forever, which I do. We'll talk about. I want to ask you guys all about your guys' foreverness and finding each other and choosing the one and all this. But like our friend Peter says, they couldn't be reacting. They as in other people that are resistant to personal change. They couldn't be reacting any other way, even if they tried, because all of their life experience and training to date and their DNA is like only given them that set of words to be able to speak back at that moment. And I just think that's a really good lesson for people. I think a lot of the resistance to change actually doesn't come from the fear of changing yourself. It's the fear of losing people along the way.
Yeah. Which is a very real thing. I mean, that's why we call it death rebirth cycles. You know, there's really like pretty significant shedding that has to occur to truly step into a new version of yourself. And it sounds glamorous, but like the reality of it is that it's actually, a lot of it is quite painful. And a lot of it has to do with mourning and grieving what was. So,
yeah,
good times.
I think this is a great point to transition into psychedelics, because that's been a huge part. It's a huge part of my life in my own journey, and it's a huge part of the book.
Mhm.
And you guys have a really good description of your use of psychedelics and like how it affected your path. And I want to read this little blip. And then I have a question for you guys about it. So you said the path of psychedelics and plant medicine, such as ayahuasca and psilocybin, coupled with the path of devotion, both to our individual becoming journeys as well as our committed partnership, has yielded the most potent, accelerated results. What we love most about these transformational paths is the very thing that they have in common. They force us to surrender our defenses and let ourselves be seen fully in all of our magic and all of our mess. So the first question is, how crucial have psychedelics been to your journey? And, let's say these plant medicines never exist. Like, it would be weird to imagine a world without them, but how have they taken part in your guys' lives?
I mean, they've really been a significant tool, I would say, for us to move through defense mechanisms, walls, resistance, fear. I mean, all the natural stuff that comes up, like we think of love as like, well, of course everyone wants love, right? Everyone wants to love and be loved, and that's just a very natural human thing. But the reality is that love is like terrifying. Like, real love is fucking terrifying to our human ego because it just obliterates us. And so our process of merging, coming together, especially because of how radically different we were and our worldviews didn't fully align in a lot of ways. Benjamin comes from a very traditional, upbringing. His mother was 19 when she had him. She met her husband, his dad, when she was 15. They were together their entire lives. I come from the complete opposite spectrum of that. Like, my mother was never married. Neither of my parents have ever been married. I really don't have examples of like long lasting committed partnerships. And then also I'm just sort of wired in this very like Aquarian, anti-authoritarian, rebellious way. And I've always rejected the status quo and rejected these things that people do, like getting married, for example.
Mhm.
Like, I don't need to do that. That's not part of my path. And then I meet this man who's like really met me with a level of conviction, kind of like right away, of like, you are the person I've been looking for. And it was, of course, amazing. And also like, I was shitting my pants, I was like, what the fuck is happening to me right now? I really felt like I mean, that in and of itself was a psychedelic experience, just falling in love with this man. And then on top of that, integrating ayahuasca and different psychedelics into our journey to help us move through some of those challenges and some of those questions. And there was several points where we were like, maybe this isn't actually going to work. And then we would take it to the medicine, and the medicine would show us where we were just fighting love, like just resisting love because we were fucking scared of getting hurt, So it's been such a huge tool. And I think that obviously MDMA therapy for couples is becoming like more and more accepted, I think, as a modality that people can use.
And a lot of people don't even, just to interject on that for a
Yeah.
second, like, a lot of people don't realize that was its original
That was its
primary
original
use.
primary use.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would say that that is just the tip of the iceberg. Like there's actually so much more that can happen there. And the reason is just like we said in the book, it's because these these modalities force us to take the mask off and let ourselves be seen fully. And I think that's ultimately what intimacy is all about, right? You could be married to someone for 50 years and not ever actually know who they truly are deep down in the most vulnerable, purest, untainted expression of their being, because there's just so much in the way. So for us, I think that's been the real gift is being able to see each other in that way, and choose each other again and again and again from that pure place.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add. I would just say that, it helped just bring down the walls in our relationship. Early on, especially when there were some questions, every time it was just like the medicine would just show you, as you said, that where your ego and your defense walls were kind of getting in the way, and then it showed us also that, like, our love was medicine, not just for us, but sharing our journey. The medicine just kept telling us your love is medicine to be shared. But the medicine has been extremely powerful for us, and it allowed us. I don't think that, like, if we would have met and medicine wouldn't have been a part of life, I think the connection would have been so powerful, and we would. But I think what it allowed us to do was grow exponentially, and so that's how, 4 months into our relationship, we bought a gorgeous property to house transformational retreats, in Malibu. We, a month later, we're through a surprise housewarming party that was a surprise wedding, where we gave 80 people mushrooms and shared our love story. And the medicine allowed us to move at a really exponential pace. And so, yeah, it's been powerful. I can't even imagine my life without um, the medicine being a part of it at this stage.
Well, I mean, we've also taken really healthy breaks from the medicine work, which was also important because I think
Mm.
falling in love is in and of itself an altered state of consciousness, right? Just from
You're
like
fully on drugs when
you're on
drunk.
drugs, like you're
Fully on
fucking
drugs.
high,
Yeah.
like and so that coupled with psychedelics, which of course amplify and enhance everything, was we're both pretty extreme people, if you haven't noticed.
Yep.
So of course we that was really incredible. And then there was also like phases of our journey where we really had to let go of those extreme states and like be in a very like find the magic in the mundane,
Mhm.
you know? And also our sexual connection being so explosive, when that was taken off the table through this 180 days of celibacy, which if you read the book, you can understand kind of like the context for that.
Mhm.
But Benjamin was prescribed 180 days of celibacy by one of his teachers, and I decided that I was going to do 180 days of no mind altering substances of any kind as well. So it was really like we've been on both sides of the spectrum. We've been in the like super extreme
Mhm.
places, and we've also been in the very like, okay, we're not having sex and we're not altering our consciousness. We're living our lives and we're building a business and we're taking care of our family. And that phase, that 6 months was, I didn't know I needed it, but there was a part of me that needed to know that this connection was real in the mundane
Mm.
as well. And it was so beautiful, the intimacy and the connection that became available in the absence of all of these things, that was one of the final pieces that I really needed to feel viscerally before I was able to make that lifelong commitment and actually get married.
Mm. Wow. And something you guys wrote about is you gave this example, and people ask me this as well. Or I spend some good amount of time talking about is psychedelics necessary for growth, or is it it's like you guys said, it's a tool, but you gave this example of the burning forest, and I think it's such a good example because um it kind of paints the picture of like, while it's not, maybe you could get there without psychedelics, it's often the quickest way to get there, and we've only been, to our knowledge, prescribed like a certain amount of years that we're allowed to live. Can you give that example and kind of share that? I think it's a really beautiful way to describe what psychedelics can help you do.
Sure. I mean, I grew up with a mother who was very spiritual, very much on the path of meditation, and is a full-time meditation teacher. And she always believed that taking anything external to have a spiritual experience was like cheating. It was like the shortcut, you know?
Mhm.
And there's a lot of people who believe that. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe there's something there. Like I should really tune into that, you know? Is that true? Um, and so really meditating on it, and meditation is also a big part of my life. The analogy that came through was, if you were in a burning forest, would you take the long way or would you take the shortcut? And I think if we zoom out and we look at the context of where we are right now as a species, sure, it may be a lot more sustainable in the long run to, you know, sit down and meditate for an hour every day and really tap in and earn it, right? In the traditional way. But the time that that would take is not time that I feel that we actually have as a collective right now. Like we actually need the shortcut because our planet is metaphorically and in some ways literally on fire. You know, the unprocessed trauma that we are carrying, billions of humans are carrying around in their minds, hearts, bodies, spirits, is absolutely overwhelming. And so we need real tools to start to do that deeper work. But our egos are these bodyguards that are protecting us from feeling all these feelings that we don't want to feel, which are also protecting us and preventing us from actually doing the work we need to do and healing our own trauma. This is why psychedelics are so profoundly powerful, especially right now, is because they can accelerate and give us access to these parts of our subconscious that we would normally not be able to tap into.
I think it's important to also say psychedelics are not for everyone,
Absolutely.
and we don't recommend that everyone take psychedelics. And that even within the world of psychedelics, like, ayahuasca is our main teacher, right? But different people resonate with different medicines as well. And so it's important to, and we dive into this in the book, but like be really discerning about who you're sitting with, what the intention is, and why you're sitting with these medicines. And also, like, we don't think that everybody out there should take psychedelics, and certainly, check with your doctor and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so it's important. Like, it's a tool, and there's other tools that are really powerful, and we have tons of friends that are really deep meditators, and do breath work, and there's so many other tools. This just happens to be one that we resonate with, and we honor all the other tools out there that are equally powerful.
Yeah, and just like, a lot of times it's not just one thing, right? There's plenty of people who go and have a psychedelic experience and it's maybe even really profound, but not that much actually changes in their life because they're not integrating that into the fabric of their everyday reality afterwards. So I think it's in conjunction. I would say a lot of times psychedelics can really amplify what's already there. So if there's already, a practice that's in place of inner work or of emotional support or just meditation, journaling, breath work, whatever it might be. And then if psychedelics feel true to integrate into that, then now everything can kind of like grow. And there's also many people who don't feel that they need the psychedelic experience and are actually able to do this work without it. Absolutely. So there's certainly not a one size fits all situation.
And I think, the reason why psychedelics get so much attention is because of the stigma, right? Like because of what happened in the 60s and 70s and because of like, it's the two topics that you guys mainly cover in the book that are the most stigmatized is sex and psychedelics, right? So it's
Which
they
are
have
great
more
combination too.
great combination. There's a whole chapter on that, but like, they have so much more of a hurdle to overcome.
Mhm.
And exactly what you said, if you look at the brain scan of someone who's deep in transcendental meditation, someone who has psilocybin in their system, it looks the same, right? So it's the same, dissociation of the ego to, removal from the default mode network, like all the same things are kind of happening. And something you said that I think is really important, and it's part of the reason why we started this podcast is, and one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about microdosing and helping to normalize the conversation around that is to help associate it as part of the wellness conversation, not the wellness conversation,
Mhm.
not the golden ticket to anything. It's like, just as we would talk about cold exposure and plant-based diet and movement and all of these things, it's another tool that you can use, in balance with the others. If you look at someone that is not living a healthy life and they're using psychedelics in isolation without any of the other things, that's probably not a well-rounded, healthy person. And I think that your book, what it does a really beautiful job of doing, while it's, a huge highlight of destigmatizing psychedelics, is helping to associate them as part of the overall wellness conversation. It's not just a book about psychedelics. It's, that's one of the main tools in there, but there's a lot of tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the biggest shadow sides of the whole psychedelic movement is really, we have this fixation in our culture of like the quick fix magic pill solution.
Silver bullet. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's not that. I mean, it's just not. It's a tool that can support you on the path, as we said, and it can also set you back on the path. I think, again, if it's the wrong intentions, if it's not the right alignment, not the right set and setting, like if you're not really sincere, it can actually set you back. It can go the other direction too. So,
and I think you referenced it earlier. I think that people think about the experience, right? The ceremony of sitting with the medicine, but it's really about the integration work. And that's why in our program, it's a 6-month container that we take people through, because it takes a long time to do the work after the ceremony to really integrate what happened and really actually ground it into your reality. That's where the real work is. It's not the ceremony is like one piece of it. And sometimes it takes you 6 months to integrate one ceremony.
Or years.
Yeah. And so
yeah,
there has to be a willingness to like step into that level of commitment behind it. Otherwise, it's just spiritual tourism.
And I also think that's, it kind of to bring it full circle with everything you're talking about, with explaining your path of becoming to people that may have resistance to it. I think something that really isn't talked about too much, but I'm sure you guys have experienced, I've definitely experienced, where someone, goes and does a psychedelic experience, whether it's psilocybin, ayahuasca, and they have just, been in the cosmos, for lack of a better word. And then they come back into this 3D reality where like, people are driving around, going to Erewhon, brushing their teeth, like very mundane human stuff. And there's a disconnect, right? Like, so to integrate back into this 3D world that we live in, whether, there's other worlds that you can go and visit for sure, but to expertly integrate into the 3D world is a feat, to say the least. And I think that someone said this to me once. They're like, the most spiritually evolved people around you are the ones that you would never know. Like they're just so unassuming guardian angels of the universe kind of thing, where they're so integrated into this version of reality because they've done enough work where they can do that expertly, where they're subtly guiding rather than it being like in your face. And that's where you experience the most resistance, right? It's like kind of not manipulative, but more subtle than that. So I think a good place to take the conversation now, and this is something a lot of people ask you guys about, is your love and your relationship. A lot of the book is about the path of choosing each other. And so many people, actually more so is their driving purpose than, what am I going to do with my life, is who am I going to spend my life with? And this idea of the one and like your lifetime partner. And it's such a burning question for so many people. And you guys have such a beautiful love story. It's dynamic and crazy and all the things, but how did you know that each other was the one? How would you describe that concept? I think we should just start there.
Yeah. So again, how to answer it quickly. Azrya and I, within, basically within her, she sat in a ceremony between the first time we saw each other and what you might call a first date, which was like we ate for 30 minutes before we ended up in the bedroom. But she sat in a ceremony where just the medicine showed her like our love and the connect. I mean, we just met at a dinner with a group of people, and from that, she sat and coincidentally, she had a ceremony that just showed her, where our love was going to be. And she basically came over for dinner and never left. Um, yeah, so it was pretty instantaneous. I would say 2 weeks after, I was going to Tulum for the summit conference, and I invited her 2 weeks into the relationship, and we spent 2 weeks in Tulum. And by the end of that, we were planning our entire lives together. We knew we were going to buy a retreat center to do this transformational work. We knew we were going to write a book. Yeah, so it was just like we were mapping it all out. It was kind of insane. But I guess to talk more specifically about, I think, where you're going with it, for me, which I guess is more interesting, is there was this knowing, like a deeper knowing within myself, that um I was staying in relationships, or I was dating women that weren't that I knew at a deep level weren't the one. But because of the insecurity, maybe, of being able to find somebody else, or the the stark how difficult it was potentially to be alone, um it took me a long time to move through that, and I knew at a deep level that I needed to become still. And when I stopped searching and stopped looking for something outside of myself, um and and that was a difficult process for me to go through. But when I actually kind of stopped and was just like, I'm good right where I'm at, and became still, then she showed up. And so I have this quote that I like. It's, the hardest no to identify is the one closest to a yes. Um, and so once I got clear about those no's, because I'd be with, I remember talking with my one of my friends, and I'd be like, but she's fun, and she's, I'd be talking about a girl I was dating. These are all the reasons why I like spending time with her. But there was some deal breakers in there that I would just kind of try and like overlook. And so when I really became honest and stepped into integrity with myself, that allowed for her to show up into my life. I don't think she could have shown up. Sure, she wouldn't have shown up. The universe wouldn't have like presented her, because I wouldn't have been ready to hold that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a journey for me. Like I said earlier, my programming around commitment is very different than Benjamin's. And also, we're at different stages. We were, when we met, we were in very different places in our life. Like, he had come out of a 12-year divorce, or 12-year marriage, gotten a divorce, and then really been on this like free, single, hooking up with all the ladies kind of chapter. That was a pretty significant chapter, many years of that, and he really like got that out of his system. So by the time I showed up on his doorstep, which I literally did, rang the doorbell, he was like really ready to be like, okay, I'm at that phase where I want to live the rest of my life and build a life with a person, and it's like forever. And so that was very confronting and intimidating for me, because I had very freshly come out of a almost 10-year relationship, which was my entire 20s. And I was just starting to feel like ready to date again. And I was like, I don't even know what that is like. I never really had the dating experience before I met my long-term partner, Adam, who I was with for, like I said, 9.5 years. Because I had been in monogamous long-term relationships before that as well, kind of starting when I was like 15, 16. So all I knew was long relationships, albeit though not with any like verbalized commitment. So my relationships ended up being long and
We just kind of
committed,
fell into them.
but it just kind of happened that way.
Yeah.
It was never like, oh, we're doing this and we're building a life. And, I was never interested in marriage. I never really believed in the institution of marriage, because my life was, and certainly my upbringing was, just constant change. And again, no reference point or example of commitment. So yeah, it was for me a pretty intense process of really like feeling that deep knowing, feeling our connection, and being like, it's undeniable, the power of this love and this union, and the way we work together, and we just, everything about it is like perfect. And then battling this other part of me that was like really deeply terrified of, well, what happens if it all if it all goes to shit? What happens if I'm the reason that it all goes to shit? Because I've generally been the one to kind of leave relationships first. And so, a lot of people, I think making a lifelong commitment to a person is a big deal and a big initiation in and of itself. But in our case, what makes it especially intense is the fact that we are living our legacy mission together, like becoming is something that I've been gestating and birthing well before meeting him. And so it's all merged together,
I know, it's like everything that you've worked
everything
for
that
is
matters
all
to
on the
me.
line.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It would be so much safer to be like, okay, I have this relationship and I'm in this lifelong commitment, and then I have like my, my mission, my business over here, and they're separated. So like if one of them don't work out, like I'm still good. I got the other one. That's not the case in this situation. We've
Mhm.
really radically merged everything. And so there's such a gift in that, but it's like the risk reward thing, right? Like there's a huge reward in it and there's also a huge risk in it.
Yeah.
And that risk was, it was a process for me to really go through like layers of fear around it, all crashing and burning. And also really just having to sit with a deeper part of me that questioned whether it's even possible to make a commitment like that, because life is innately unpredictable and things are cyclical, and to not be in resistance to that, right? Like you were saying, the seasonality of
Mhm.
relationships, like, well, how does marriage fit into that? So it was really a deep, coming back to like free will versus fate. It was like this deep inquiry around that piece. And what does it really mean to make a choice in the present moment that affects every other choice you will make for the rest of your life? It's a pretty significant initiation,
Yeah.
So for me, it's been, a lot of shedding and dying into a new version of me yet again. And then also the subject of motherhood was a very big topic. Maybe we'll save that for people to have a little bit of juicy nuggets to uncover in the book. But
It's a good sneak preview.
yeah, we definitely went through a real process around that as well, because we were not on the same page about it. And that was really scary too. So I would say that, we say our love is the medicine. But if we're talking about the medicine, like the way ayahuasca is the medicine, it's like that medicine can really fuck you up. Like it can open your heart and show you the magic and the infinite power of the universe, and it can like plunge you headfirst into your worst nightmare. And I think that that's why this dynamic is so potent, is because there's so much juice here. You know what I mean? Like it's like anything but neutral. This connection is like he triggers
not boring.
those parts of me. Yeah, those parts of me that I want to confront, because it's part of my curriculum in this lifetime to do so. And his invitation into the commitment to this relationship has been that catalyst for so much inner growth.
Someone said to me the other night, they're like, in talking about relationships, some people are for seasons, some people are for lessons, and some people are for lifetimes, and differentiating between, which of those three categories maybe there's more this person is to you, or do you even believe in lifetime people? And it's all these questions. So I love the way you guys speak about it. I think that what really resonated for me when I was reading the book, and based on other stuff that I was going through in my own life, it's the fear because of the heartbreak potential, right? Which I actually think is the most beautiful process to go through. Like it's the biggest lesson in all, but you understand why people die from it after you go through it.
Yeah.
Like it didn't really made a whole lot of sense to me where you see all these older couples. I'm like, well, that's convenient that they're both passing away within weeks of each other, because when you're losing someone that you love, it's so painful. Like you actually feel like your heart.
Yeah.
And there's some science around that, like where like excess blood flow to your heart. Like there's some actual things like why your heart hurts, which I can't speak eloquently to. But the fear of that was why most people don't put themselves in that position, or even if they're in the position of being in marriage, 50% of them don't work out. The other 50% aren't like, this vital, passionate love story, for lack of a better word. But one thing you guys said to me, which really resonated, it's also in the book when you talk about this idea of sacrificing freedom. And that's something I think that a lot of people that are on their mission in life are really scared of, about joining paths with another person and then losing their freedom. I think B said this around ultimate freedom coming from having all of the options, but rather choosing one option with every ounce of your being and pouring yourself entirely into making it the most profound thing it can be. And that's the differentiation I think that you guys draw between sacred union and marriage. So it doesn't feel like it's not a sacrifice. It's actually the ultimate freedom choice. I don't know if you guys have any extra words there, but
David Brooks comes to mind. He wrote a book called The Second Mountain, which we named our property after. But he talks about, like, we live in this world, we were talking about with our assistant yesterday, but we live in this world where there's so many options, right? And it's so easy to be like, well, I don't know about this relationship because there's a gazillion. I could just get on my app and swipe a few more times and maybe there's a better option, right? And so we think of freedom as options. But sometimes having options is the opposite of freedom, right? And so when you commit to something fully, it allows you no longer are looking. And so it's one thing to be in a relationship and still be open to, like, oh, well, I'm not sure. And so I'm still kind of in the back of my head, I'm still open. There might be something better out there. But I think that when you fully commit, like you truly commit to somebody, there's nothing more free than that, because you now have all that energy that you put into, like, questioning, looking, right, to focus on other areas of your life and to pour into the relationship you're in. And so David Brooks talks about this, but actually in a really good book, The Second Mountain, but diving deeper into that relationship is actually the most free thing you can do.
And also for me, a really powerful distinction was, or just awareness was, the one is not just that sort of romantic a sense of like, oh, there's one person that's perfectly designed for me. It's like the larger one, right? We are all one. And so if I'm with one person, they are that infinite oneness. So I can actually experience all the flavors of the universe through that one person if I'm willing to go infinitely deep into the multidimensionality of who they be. I don't need to go out and have all of this variety, because it's actually all already right in front of me. It just needs to be unlocked. And we talk a lot about devotion in the book as well. And like that piece was very powerful for me, like anchoring in this notion of what does it mean to be in devotion to this being that is actually infinite. And on top of that, what does it look like for me to stop playing into this illusion that my satisfaction exists outside of myself, because I am also the one, right? And my connection to spirit, to the divine, to the universe, whatever you want to call it, is where my true fulfillment lies. I can't expect him to fulfill me at the core. I have to be willing to do that for myself. And that's real freedom, is when I'm no longer dependent on those external things. And that's when I can come into this relationship and into this union so nourished and so like my cup overfloweth energy, you know? And I find that the more I cultivate that within myself, the more what we have deepens and blossoms and just continues to unlock and reveal new facets. So the fear of like, oh my God, what if, all my other relationships eventually kind of fizzled, right? And that's like trauma. Like that's traumatic to be in love with someone and then to just feel that start to like disappear and you don't know how to get it back. So intense. It's not something we know how to navigate. We don't get tools to navigate this. And yet it's such an intense process for our sensitive spirit. So for me, like I had to face off with that fear in a big way and realize, oh, but there's an infinite well here. I needed to develop the tools to be able to know how to access the juice that can continually give and flow.
Yeah, by the way, we got here a half hour early and we fucked in the backseat of our car. When we came up here.
That's how you keep the love alive.
I was like, what do people
in
do
the Alli
when they're
parking lot?
She's like, what do people do when they're early?
It's like, what do people do when they're sitting in the car waiting for an appointment? I have an idea.
I love that, bringing that energy into the podcast. You know, that's fresh. I love that.
I hope we're still doing that when we're like 75.
That's
I hope the plumbing still works.
That is, I mean, well, what is that's a good, well, before I ask this question, just a brief note on that. When you were talking about this like abundance of choice and how most people think they want to live in that abundance of choice where, it actually can preserve your freedom, it kind of reminded me of like living in IKEA. Like, what a terrible life if you were to be like constantly in IKEA, so many distractions, so many
That's
choices.
the world we live in.
We live in IKEA, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Okay, so what is some of your guys' secrets? There's a whole book of them, but how do you guys keep your love alive and like continue that relentless devotion, to use your words?
I mean, I guess first of all, I want to say, like, you make it sound, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but you make it sound like we got it all figured out. And I
Right.
would say that, like, we view it as a practice. And so to be in devotion to something is not like, oh, now it's perfect and I don't have to like pour myself into it. Like, devotion is continuously pouring yourself and giving yourself to this thing, whatever you're devoted to. And so we don't have it all figured out. We just kind of are. There's a level of commitment. And it doesn't even feel like a choice. It's like the choiceless choice, but the devotion is there's no secret, right? Like, we can't say, here's the 10 steps to like, make it all work perfectly, right? There's no 10 steps. To me, it's just this, like, when you're just devoted. And then I think the piece I think that is really special between us is any little thing that comes up. If there's a distortion, if there's like ooh, that felt weird to me, like, we talk about it. And so there's this relentlessness to like keeping, Azrya refers to it as like the crystalline palace, right? Like, if there's a distortion, like, we look at it and that's not always in the relationship. It might be individually. It might be like, okay, I'm feeling this. How can I take more ownership for how I'm feeling and not be like, okay, like, I'm feeling this about this person did this to me, versus like, I'm going to go within and say, like, why is that triggering me? Like, what's going on within me? And so there's there's a relentlessness to looking at anything that's out of alignment. And I would say the other thing that comes is just the devotion to the relationship. And so there's just a kind of overflowing of commitment.
I mean, I would say that I have a secret.
On the edge of my seat over.
Death. Have a threesome with death.
Mm.
In the sense of, I think the biggest thing that kills chemistry and passion in relationships is that you start taking the other person for granted and you stop seeing them with fresh eyes. They're just always there. It's like, okay, we're committed. We made this agreement and now we're living this life, and life happens, right? And we're busy and we're mowing the lawn and we're paying the bills and taking the trash out. And like, before you know it, somehow that magic essence sort of gets lost in the mundane life things. And then something new, shiny comes along that brings that magic back online, and we let go of the old and go for the new, right? That's a lot of times the pattern. But when you hold the reality of death close in your heart, which is, for me, the felt awareness that this could all be over tomorrow. We met these two girls at this New Year's Eve event that we went to, who were like our age, and they're both widows. And they had their soulmate. They were like in love, building a life, and both of their partners very suddenly died. And we had some really profound conversations with them, and it was just such a reminder for me that in even just having the conversation with them and hearing them share about their process of going through this, and one of them literally held her husband in her arms while he was dying, like, the gratitude that I felt for this connection amplified. So to me, there's this really sacred connection between grief and gratitude. They're very interlinked. the reason that we grieve is because we loved and we were grateful for something that was really special. Otherwise, we wouldn't grieve. And I think for me personally, I walk through life and especially in this relationship with this constant awareness that this is a gift and it could be taken away in a heartbeat. And to me, that has been an incredibly powerful way to just keep that magic alive.
And most people need a life altering experience to have that kind of energy that they go about their life with.
Yeah.
And you hear it time and time again when someone has their wake up call when either they hit rock bottom, which I feel like, you guys talk a lot about rock bottoms in the book. Those are highly valuable. You experience a death, you experience a loss of a loved one, whether it's, through death or another reason. You have a profound psychedelic experience where to quote Brian Marasco's quote of die before you die, to have that shake up, which you guys are continually putting yourselves in, allows you to actually go about life with that energy. Because, we don't live in a world that has been designed to allow us to feel that gratitude, because there is so many shiny new things all the time. But to be able to exist in this reality and make sense of it, I just feel like there's so many tools that you guys are talking about. I think that's the exact essence of it. Like, how can you create that for yourself so that you can go about life with that energy?
Absolutely.
There's a few more questions I have for you guys. We'll wrap it up in like the next 5 minutes or so. I had 65. I don't think I got close to all of them. But with the second mountain, I think this is important because it's a huge concept that I love. And actually, when I heard the name of your guys' property, I didn't fully understand the concept and didn't know about the book. And now I know about it, and I think it's a really beautiful concept. So maybe B, do you want to explain what is the second mountain? Why did you name your property it? And then if you can wrap into your answer, do you think it's possible to get to the second mountain without climbing the first? I don't know if that's in the book. I haven't read it, but
yeah. So we named our property the Second Mountain, inspired by David Brooks's book, and in it he talks about how not always, but traditionally people climb this first mountain of traditional success. You go to college, you get the degree, you get the job, you work really hard, you struggle, you get married, the white picket fence, right? The whole kind of thing. And there's this, he doesn't make it wrong, right? There's not, in the same way we mature, in the same way you go to high school and then you go to college, there's a maturation that happens. And so it doesn't make that wrong, but that's frequently where you get to. And then people wake up at some point and say, okay, I'm at the top of this first mountain of traditional success and I'm unfulfilled. And some people embark on climbing the second mountain, which is really being of service to others. And so we named our property the Second Mountain because that's the work we do, is help people. We want to catch people in that transition from first mountain to second mountain. And then to answer your question, and I very much follow that kind of trajectory, right? I'm very much on my second mountain, and we evolved that concept, and we have what we call the third mountain. Which
there's a third. I didn't know about the third.
Well, it's not in his book, but we kind of evolved it because we feel like very frequently people bring into the second mountain the same energy that they brought into the first mountain. And so they show up in this second mountain. So let's say now all of a sudden you're being very purposeful. You're running a nonprofit, but you're still forcing, you're still stressing, there's still anxiety. And there's this third mountain that you can't climb. You have to kind of float to it, and it's Avatar style. And it's when you're really so aligned that things, you're so aligned with your dharma, your purpose, and the universe, that things just become easeful. And there isn't this energy of forcing and needing to get anywhere other than where you're at. There's still the passion and there's still drive, but it's great effort you're putting into it, but it feels effortless because you're so aligned. That's how we would define the third mountain. And then to answer the second part of your question, can you start off on the second mountain? I would say absolutely. It's less common, but Azrya was very much that archetype where she was like, gave away all her belongings, shaved her head, and was like, I'm going to change the planet with not a penny in her pocket.
Mm.
And so what's interesting about the work we do and the becoming process, the 6-month coaching process that we take people to, is we have two archetypes. One is who I was 5 or 10 years ago, and the other one is who Azrya was 5 or 10 years ago. And so one is like, yeah, I've had some traditional success, and I'm wanting to live with more purpose, right? And the other one is like, for Azrya's given name was Melinda, and so we call it the Melindas. You know, having deep purpose and just ready to pour themselves into the universe, but not necessarily knowing how to ground that into the 3D and like make shit happen, right? On one side, you have the people who really know how to make shit happen in this,
And
you
have
know,
the resources to
and
do
have
it.
the
So, yeah.
resources. And on the other side, the opposite. And so we have two programs for both of those archetypes, and ideally help them move towards each other, right?
Mm.
Yeah, because they each have puzzle pieces that the other one doesn't have. So that first, second, third mountain also corresponds with those 3 stages of becoming that we had started with, right? Which is like, first mountain is my personal preference. Second mountain is kind of mutual preference, like I'm in service, I'm giving back. And then the third mountain is that third stage of, well, what if it's not about me or about you? It's about what love wants, or what would love choose. So yeah, we kind of we piggybacked off of that a bit, but I think a lot of people in this whole idea of the American dream, right, which was a big part of our cultural narrative for a long time, is kind of starting to fall apart, and people are looking for something more meaningful. And especially those who got to the top of that first mountain and are like, yo, I actually made it, and like I'm still feeling this void inside of me. Something's off. That's the sweet spot, I think, of where we can really meet people and give them an opportunity to step into something different.
So, what does the world look like? Let's say, when millions of people read your book or engage with your platform, like what is the effect that you hope it has on the world in 5 years, 10
Mhm.
years, and so on?
Well, I mean, it's really like it's an invitation, I think. It's an invitation to look at yourself with new eyes and realize that who you think you are isn't necessarily who you actually are, and what you thought you wanted isn't actually, what you really want underneath. We talk the subtitle of our book is Everything You Didn't Know You Wanted. And so it's relinquishing, I guess, the invitation to relinquish the intellectual knowing of the mind, or of the programming that you've received over the course of your life, and let go of that to tap into a deeper knowing, like an all caps knowing. Um, and then start that journey, because I think, like, Benjamin uses that word a lot, the choiceless choice. But I think if someone's really primed and ready to truly step onto their path of becoming, it will feel like the choiceless choice. It will feel just like, there's something happening through me, and I need to just continually lean into it. And yes, you'll have choice points, and you'll have moments of resistance and fear and all of those things. But our hope is that our story, and the reason that we've shared it so transparently and rawly without censoring any of it, is that we hope that it can serve as a reference point for people, as a case study, in a way of like, we don't have it all figured out, but here's how it works for us, and here's how it looks for us. And now there's something tangible that our reader, our listener, our viewer can point to and go, huh, that kind of makes sense to me. I want to step onto this path. So that would be kind of like the meta answer.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add, but before we started this podcast, you said that this book landed in your hands like at the perfect time, and I've had
Mhm.
that happen so many times with so many books in my life. Books have been one of the most powerful kind of teachers for me. The idea that somebody could spend 3 or 4 years or a lifetime gathering the information and editing it to make it perfect, and then give it to you, and you in 5 hours can look at what they did over that lifetime.
Mhm.
So I've always looked at books as these valuable tools. But I guess my hope is that the book lands in the right. We're not looking at it as like, we need to sell a gazillion copies or anything. It's like, I hope it lands in the right people's hands, um, and that our lessons, right? Because we don't profess to be gurus in any way, but the lessons that we've learned through the challenges in our life can serve. And really it's intended to be an entry point, as you said earlier, into the ecosystem. And so that those that do resonate can kind of take the next step on their journey of becoming, right? Because the book is just kind of a starting point.
Yeah, and becoming right now, it's all about us, but really the larger vision, and this is something that we see outliving both of us. But the larger vision is for this to be a platform that shares the stories and the journeys and the tools of many, many different people who are on this path, so that there will be many access points and many ways to connect and many offerings to engage with beyond just what it is that we can offer the two of us. So we're just at the very, very, very beginning of a much, much larger journey and a much larger vision. And we're just so honored and excited to be able to start sharing it with the world. So thank you for having us.
Amazing. Okay, this is my three last miniature questions for
Okay.
you guys. What is the greatest lesson that Bee has taught you?
Mm. Devotion.
Bee, what's the greatest lesson Azrya has taught you?
Trust her. The level at which she trusts is remarkable, and it's been a guidepost for me to strive for.
And for both of you, what's the greatest lesson that psychedelics have taught you? To bring it full circle for the theme of this podcast.
I think surrender would be the word. Surrender to what is.
I think that for me, we often talk about psychedelics as sometimes you say, okay, like I'm calling in prosperity or I'm calling in relationship, and the medicine shows you like the most exquisite states of bliss, right? I'm in this relationship. It's like your heart open love, and then, or like abundance, prosperity, right? And then sometimes it forces you in the other direction where it shows you like you want this, and it takes you in the other direction. And you're like, well, I'm calling in this. Why is the medicine taking me in the other direction? So it's bringing up, the medicine will bring up things that you need to move through so you can end up in abundance. You need to face off with the fear of having nothing, right? And so the medicine does that for you. But I would say the biggest thing the medicine has showed me is it's given me a much deeper felt experience of what it is to love. And so I have felt love at a level that I didn't know was possible. And so because now I have actually had a lived experience through this medicine work of feeling that level of love, it has helped me exponentially kind of just open my heart.
Yeah, I would follow that with, first word surrender, second word is multiverse.
Mm.
Really, really realizing like there's not just one version of reality. There's many, perhaps infinite. And to me, the psychedelic experience has given me like a tangible glimpse into what those are. And it's liberated my entire experience of what it means to be alive.
I'm really excited for people to read this book and just engage with you guys and be a part of your journey. It's really inspiring. The book is amazing. Like even if you're not interested in you know, any sort of personal development growth, it's just a great story. Like there's so much there. So
If you liked 50 Shades of Grey,
if you like 50 Shades of Grey,
you'll like our book.
it's 100% you will love this book. It's better in all the ways. Where can people find you? We'll link up everything in the show notes and all that, but just high level, what's next? What can people expect? Where to find you?
Yeah. Well, becoming.me is our website, and that's the platform, and that's
Spelled with a Q.
Yeah, becoming spelled with a Q,
Mhm.
which we didn't talk about, but the Q represents questions. So the willingness, the path of becoming is really defined by the willingness to ask essential questions. So becoming.me with a Q. And on that page, there'll be the opportunity to join our mailing list, which we would highly recommend because we're really, the world is so saturated with content, right? Digital content is just like competing for our attention like everywhere. And we really believe that media can be medicine, but a lot of medicine is over the counter, right? It's not like you just sort of get it on every corner. The real medicine is something that you want to be present for, you want to be able to really receive. And so the content that we want to release and are releasing very shortly is going to be held kind of in a little bit more of a sacred container. So to access it, so joining the mailing list is the best way. And then on Instagram, we are just at BEQOMING with a Q.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I love this conversation. I can't wait for people to hear it and just to continue to see your journey. I know it's just the very beginning. So much more to come.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for diving into the multiverse with us. If you're interested in being a future guest on the show, sponsorship, partnership, or you're just mushroom curious, we're always looking to expand our mycelium network. Find us on Instagram at Multiverse or online at yourmultiverse.com. See you next week.